Hello, guys, and welcome to the Fight Podcast with Sharir Richman. This will be a weekly podcast starting with the release of this first episode. First of all, who are we? My name is Jan. I'm a Krav instructor with ICCS, and your name is in the title. Who are you?
I'm Sharir Richman. I'm the ICCS head instructor.
You're head instructor of ICCS Krav Maga. Okay.
That's right.
But I think this is important for the people to know. Krav Maga is not your only bread and butter.
No, I'm also the head coach in MMA Jerusalem. And I also instruct in the military, hand-to-hand combat. So I work with all the fields of, all the possible fields of fighting.
In all of the different qualifications.
Exactly.
So the important thing to get or to understand here, I think, is that MMA or combative sports and Krav, as you teach it to civilians in the military, there's difference between these two disciplines, right?
Yes and no, because a fight is a fight and no violence is violence. But of course, if you teach in the military, they have their specific needs that civilians might not need to have, you know. So they get their specific needs that they need to have, just like someone who wants to be a professional MMA fighter, he has to have his specific needs as well. But overall, a fight's a fight.
Mm-hmm. That's the question, because if you say special needs for or specific needs for, let's say, the military, in the end, in the octagon or in the battlefield, the idea is to neutralize your opponent. So how are there different needs in combatives on the field, in the civilian area, than there are from a fight in an octagon?
Well, a fight in an octagon, in my eyes, is a real fight. You know, a lot of people say it's not real, it's sports.
Because but, there's someone to call it.
Rules. But look, once the other guy on the other side of the octagon or the ring, he wants to take your head off, basically. A fight's a fight, you know, it's a real fight. So yeah, there's a ref in there to protect you. Maybe that's the biggest difference. Mm-hmm. But in the street, there's no one there to protect you. Mm-hmm. Losing is not an option. You know, it's if you lose a fight, an MMA fight, you know, so it's bad for your record, maybe as Sherdog, you know. But the ref should be able to protect you from getting real harm. That's why he's there, you know. But losing a street fight or losing a battle, you know, is never an option. I think that's the biggest difference.
Mm-hmm. Also, I think this is an important part of it. If there's two people in an octagon, there's two people in an octagon. There's not a whole group of friends with them. There's no weapons that could be introduced.
Right.
Especially if we talk about ICCS, for instance, there's this whole area which deals with also the use of objects in a fighting situation. For instance, with a knife.
Right.
You can't bring a knife to an MMA fight.
Exactly. There's many more options.
Or you shouldn't, at least.
many more options in a street fight than a sports fight. Mm-hmm. And you never know where it's going to go. Multiple opponents is a big problem. It's a very common thing. Mm-hmm. Also, cold weapons like knives, screwdrivers, even forks. You know,
everything you could stick in someone.
Everything goes into the body pretty easily. So those are big problems.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think this is a big thing that a lot of people watch, or especially in the combat sports world. They look at Krav Maga as this thing where it's only for this and that application, and someone who trains MMA is also a proficient fighter in the streets. That's something that I've seen repeated online again and again. And I think something that I find very interesting with ICCS, for instance, is you take some of these aspects, you take a load of these aspects from combative sports, and you introduce them into like a field. You build the system where the idea is to bring these ideas into a civilian or like a military application.
That's why we have what's called street boxing and street wrestling and street groundwork. Just for that's exactly why. But it all depends, you know. Krav Maga is a very big topic, and I think it all comes down to where you train and who trains you. Mm-hmm. Because honestly, there is a lot of nonsense out there. And sadly, Krav Maga has a bad rep because of that. Mm. Especially in the professional world, you know, in the full contact world, people in many cases disrespect Krav. And the truth is, it's for good reasons sometimes, you know. what they say is true about a lot of the techniques and a lot of the ways people train. I'm trying to change that slowly, trying to bring sexy back into Krav.
I mean, I think that's also important to note with this. There is an ICCS fighting team who competes.
Yes, we have an ICCS
MMA.
fight team. It's growing. It's relatively new, especially because of COVID. We started it right before, so we had to start over again.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea is to take ICCS students from around the world, anybody who wants to compete, we do it together. We help each other. There's a lot of knowledge within the organization. Instructors from around the world. We have a lot of BJJ black belts. We have sambo guys, or judo guys. We have great boxers, great kickboxers as coaches. Very proud of that fact. Very proud to be part of this organization, and we work together. Just to help each other out with each and every one of our students. To bring them to the best level they could.
That is something that when I joined ICCS, that I found very refreshing. That you could see, okay, the idea is here to build up a Krav system which is not so opaque, because a lot of the stuff that I've seen is it just hails from tradition. Like, we hail back to this very important figure in the Krav world, and that makes us someone who is qualified to talk about these things. But the big issue with Krav is oftentimes you see techniques, you see approaches that are not really reproducible in like a combat scenario under a set of rules. Like, you can't take that into a ring. And with ICCS, a lot of these things you can do under pressure. You can practice them properly without protective gear, because there's the idea to, not all of it, but a lot of it hails from this MMA tradition.
Right.
And so there's this approach where you can also, like, you can watch your progress, which you can't usually do with some of the combative things, because you can see a progression in your technique. You can see how much you improve under pressure. And this is something, especially with the instructor program, you see these things as you progress through the stages.
Also, if it doesn't work in the ring, it's not going to work in the street.
Yeah, that's the idea.
You have to understand that.
But not everything that works in the ring works in the street. That's important as well.
Of course. But theoretically, like in the big picture, if it doesn't work in the ring, it doesn't work in the street.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another reason why we do what we do.
And that's the main thing where I see the MMA training and the Krav portion align.
That, and also, like, I mean, with MMA, especially MMA sparring, it's the closest way to spar to get ready for a street fight, because you have all the elements in there. You have the stand-up, you have the kicking, the striking, the clinch, the wrestling, and the groundwork, and the ground and pound, which, just like in a street fight, you can have all those elements as well. You can end up on the ground, you can end up standing, So except for the fact that there's no knife attacks in MMA, that we do separately. And by the way, we also kind of spar. You've seen how we do it with the knives. We wrestle and
I've
grapple.
done it.
Yeah, exactly. All instructors do it. We wrestle and grapple with the knife to give that element as well. But I think MMA is the closest sensation to a street fight, without the weapons and multiple opponents. That's why it's so important.
Yeah. The only thing... Okay, let me ask you something that might be a little out of the ordinary with these questions is, if you think about everything you have to teach someone to be ready to say, okay, you're properly prepared with the elements that I can give you in this ICCS framework for going out and being effective in the streets.
What tools would I want to give someone?
No, it's not. Do you think that is more or less technique than you have to teach someone to be prepared for a fight?
For a professional fight, you mean?
Let's say for a fight with someone who's over.
I think a person who wants to be able to survive a street fight, he has to be an expert on escaping bad positions. An expert. More so than an MMA fighter, because his life depends on it. If someone mounted you for 5 minutes in the ring, you lost a round.
Yeah.
If someone got your back bound,
you lost your consciousness, yeah.
So if it takes you... Look, a street fight is between 3 to 12 seconds. An average street fight. Afterwards, if the fight continues, it's one-sided. One is kicking, the other one's ass. But if there was any resistance, it's in the beginning. Now, if you're listening to this and you say, wait, I can't get a guy off, someone's mounting me or he has my back, it takes me like 7 minutes to get him off in training. You know what 7 minutes are in a street fight?
Especially if there's other people involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if it takes you more than a few seconds to get a guy off of you, that's a problem. So that's why I say, if you want to prepare for a real fight, you have to be an expert in escaping bad positions. And you have to train. The only way to be an expert is to do it over and over and over again. Not theoretically, but with your training partner really resisting you and giving you a hard
bad time.
Exactly.
That's what I was.
You don't have to
thinking
be
about,
an expert in submissions, for example. It's a bonus.
You would never do, or probably not.
Never
do
say
that.
never. Never say never.
Okay, but usually,
if you're fast enough to crack a guy's arm, why not? But never say never. But you have to be an expert in escaping bad positions. And by the way, one of the key elements of being an expert in escaping bad positions are knowing how to keep it if it was the other way around. Being expert in positions.
So you know what to watch for, yeah.
Exactly. And an expert in takedown defense. So to be an expert in takedown defense, your wrestling should be pretty good.
You should know how to take down,
Exactly. Most jiu-jitsu people, for example, have very bad wrestling because it's totally on the ground. That's all.
Because you start kneeling.
Yeah, you start. One guy sits on his butt. So it's a problem. But by the way, you also see that if many times if a jiu-jitsu guy he turns to an MMA, he has a problem with that in the beginning. He fights a wrestler, all of a sudden he's in another world of hell. So that's why we do a lot of that in our training. A lot of escaping bad positions. When we start ground fighting, it's always when someone's on your back or someone's on your mount. Now we don't start from a neutral position, hardly ever. Just to get that habit of being comfortable
in uncomfortable
situations, and also giving my students the confidence to know that they can escape it fast too.
So they're used to the idea, okay, I could still fight from this position, because something that I've seen with some combative systems is this idea of someone grabs you for a takedown and now you defend this, which is if someone knows how to take you down and this person grabs you a certain way, you're going down. That's the issue with this. And so it's like, okay, you're already there. This is uncomfortable. How do you now
And it's
act?
even more uncomfortable when someone's hitting you.
Especially then,
that pressure is really on then, So if it's just grappling and he's on your back or on your mount, he's not hitting you, it's one thing, but someone's throwing elbows in your face or trying to bite you. You don't want to stay there for too long, do you?
So that's what I was thinking about with the difference between combative sports, where you have to be an expert in tactics, but also there's like multiple rounds, there's shots to be called, what to do, what to look for. There's, especially in MMA, you have people who are more proficient in wrestling or grappling. Some are more in striking and kicking. And the idea then to say, okay, there's this whole other thing for civilian, for like everyday use.
No, that's total bullshit.
That's the issue.
In my eyes.
And but the issue with these systems, if it's about self-protection or self-defense, oftentimes it's like, okay, these 3 dirty tricks, just go out there and do your thing.
Sure.
Which is a dangerous approach.
It's a dangerous approach, and it's a little bit kind of like babyish approach too. It's like, okay, we don't have to train because we kick people in the balls all day.
Yeah, and we punch them in the eye and then they collapse.
Like you have disrespect to your enemy is a very big problem. If you disrespect your enemy, you're going to end up with a big surprise.
Yeah, and I think that's a big
also,
thing.
They don't understand how tough wrestlers are, for example.
Yeah.
how tough they are.
And how fast.
How fast he goes for that single or double leg or anything, and you think you could kick him in the balls and that's it. It's not. It's just, you're in for a big surprise, It's a wrestler, that's all he does. Most people who kind of, honestly, who train like, we kick people in the balls, they don't even spar in training.
Yeah, so they're not used to pressure.
Theoretical. And then the wrestler, all he does is work under pressure and work with resistance. He's not gonna, and one of the key elements of a takedown is you don't want to hesitate. He's not gonna hesitate. He shoots right into your legs. Before you blink, you end up on the ground. If all you think, it's disrespect. You show disrespect to an enemy, it's a big
Who
problem.
trains a lot of, or dedicates a lot of his
Who
time.
is a professional in his field.
Yeah.
And most self-defense students are not professionals at their field. They just do it once or twice a week for 40 minutes, spending half of the time flirting. You know what I mean? So it's just like people look for the bridge version of anything.
Yeah.
It's always a problem.
Yeah. I think so, because that's why I asked you this question earlier on, which is more, let's not say complicated, but where there's more content to be learned. Because if you talk about the everyday approach, like Krav Maga systems usually do or oftentimes do, the issue is that you not only have to be proficient as a fighter and as a tactician in a fight, but also before the fight, you have to be aware of a danger.
Yeah, situational awareness is a big part of it.
And that's important because, or it's important that you have this combat pedigree with you, because these are things that, for instance, I've heard you say this in regards to a boxing match in sparring, where you said in shooting, we talk about never give like a stationary, like a target.
Never stay static more than 3 seconds.
And that is something that, funnily enough, you managed to get into boxing, and this is something where I see there's at least similarities in these different fields.
Because a fight's a fight, like I told you.
And that's
rules of combat don't change. The battleground changes. The kind of battleground changes.
The weapons do.
Yes, but the rules, the simple raw rules of fighting, are the same all the time. You know, and if you follow, that's why. At least with ICCS and the way I like to teach, is I work a lot on the fighting principles. Because if you follow the principles never change. The scenario may change, you know, the specific attack may change, but the fighting principles are always the same. And if you follow the fighting principles, you have a very big chance of surviving. You know, there was a knife attack some years ago already in Israel, and some guy, it was a big supermarket. He pulled out a knife. He stabbed one guy. He started to run and, you know, crazy. And there was a guy who was shopping there who happened to be armed. He happened to be a security guard, off duty, and he heard yelling, and he didn't even understand it was a knife attack. It's all on camera. You know, everything's filmed today.
He's just hearing there's something going on.
Yeah, he's hearing something going on, so he just ran to the noise. And he cuts a corner and he knocks right into the stabber's head. They both fall down. The stabber gets up.
They run into each other.
Stabber gets up. He kind of like ice picks him, you know, from the top with a knife. He attacks that hand really hard, like with his hand. And from the second collusion, it was so hard. I mean, the guy dropped his knife, turned around, started running away. He then went for his weapon, which was not on his hip. Like he usually has it. It was in his man purse. I guess that's what's called. One of those.
Like a backpack or something.
Like a man purse. You know, I don't know the right term.
Yeah, like a bag.
Yeah. And he was looking for it, so it took him time to find it, which is another story. By the way, what you can learn from that is put your weapon where you usually have it. But anyway, I saw it on the news like everyone else because it was on camera. But a day later, I get a text on Messenger. And he was like, hey, Sharir, I just wanted to thank you because what you taught me, the principle of attacking the hand with the knife, saved my life and it saved other people's life because I was the security guard from that stabbing. And I didn't remember him because at that point, those years, when he trained with me, I was training about 1,000 people a month, security guards. Private security, you know, and I had to go back and look at his picture and then look at his testings and he was average and even below average of scores. So he wasn't that good, but he was good enough to remember the principles.
Which is the main idea, not to have these complex techniques.
Just as I said, I remember to attack the hand with the knife. That's what he did, and you know, and then I could go on and on and on with these stories of real life stories. But that was just one example of why I teach principles. And not just like a lot of people do when they do self-defense, is like techniques. You know, under pressure, your heart rate shoots up. First of all, your rhetorical skills are very bad. You can't think that straight. So it has to be simple. It has to be principle-based. Because under pressure, your technical ability drops to at least drops by at least like 50%.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's a different. I think it's a really important thing to understand for grapplers, for instance, because if you look at BJJ, Luta Livre, for instance, these are sports. These are combat sports where there is a lot of technique involved, but the idea here is it's only in this kind of language.
Yes,
you use
exactly.
technique A, you counter with B, and then there's C follow-up.
Even in that, if you take a grappler who's never got punched in his face, and he has good skills on the ground,
and then you punch him,
and then you start punching him in the face, he has a very hard time applying his knowledge. Unless he trains for a few months, and then he gets used to it, of course. But if it's the first time ever, he's like, yeah, I can fight anybody because I know had an armbar or had a triangle choke from my back, and then you put him on his back, he's comfortable because he trains on his back, and all of a sudden you hammer fist him in his eye socket, and crack his jaw.
It's a false sense of security.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just like Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan until they get hit, you know?
Yeah, also if it's multiple things, because people who aren't used to train under pressure, the idea here is that a lot of these skills that I can still approach with, let's say, a capacity of like 60%, like I'm stressed, but I'm not scared for my life. I can still approach kind of a big chunk of techniques that I've learned before under pressure. But if I'm fearing for my life, this now shrinks to a window of, let's say, 5. And now the idea is, first of all, you still need to cling onto, as you call them, principles, ideas, like basic stuff. And the techniques go out the window anyways.
Exactly.
And I see this with when I train or when I'm training with other people. You have these drills where you fight for a knife. You start wrestling, then the knife comes out. You try to pin the arm. You go for the knife. Sometimes it just falls down.
Yeah, if you're like a special kind of person, or you know, and you work in a special place or special forces, you know, you're tested. Your rhetorical skills are tested, not just your physical abilities, but your skills. Your rhetorical skills are tested under pressure because they're looking for specific kind of people who could cope under a big amount of pressure. I'm assuming surgeons will be the same, you know, in a way too. You know, they have to cope under pressure.
You can detach or something.
Or pilots or something like that, you know. But the average person, you know, it's just too hard. It's too. If you do anything that's complicated, little movements, like a lot of techniques have, you know, put your pinky here, put the wrist here. It's just too. It's too much. It's too much.
I remember
pressure.
I think you told us the story about these tests with. I think they were also like security or like some law enforcement agency where they had these drills. They had to go through them, and at some point, because you had to score almost perfectly to keep remaining in this unit, and then they introduced this new little
thing. Yeah, it was like a little knot. Yeah, and they didn't know how to do it. They all failed big time.
It crashed the scores of the people because it's a new impulse. They're not used to this, and also it's fine motor skills, which go away if you're under stress.
Exactly.
So there's two approaches to this. Either you're able to lower your stress level, or you should change the way that you approach these sorts of situations.
Yeah. So you have to train under pressure. That's the most important part in your skill. So it means if you're a surgeon, you have to have very fine motor skills and train under. I'm assuming, you know, I'm not a surgeon, you know, but as a fighter, you know, train whatever you training to do has to be under pressure. It doesn't matter what kind of fight. I mean, that's why you spar so much before a fight, you know, to get used to that feeling. You know, we many times when I get a guy ready for a fight, like in the cage, we'll simulate a fight. That means we'll bring a little crowd. People will be yelling stuff, making noise. You know, it's just to get used to that
adding to the pressure. Yeah,
it's because all that adds on. You know, and as far as a street fight or any other fight, you know, training under pressure has two main elements to it, right? First of all, the person who's doing whatever he's there to do, before he starts doing his technique, he has to be already in the state of fatigue. He has to be tired. His heart rate has to be up already before he starts. Because that
out of air, maybe.
Yeah, that simulates fear, pressure, and heart rate. You know, and then the second principle is that your training partner has to be resisting whatever you're trying to do in 100%. If he's letting you do it, you're not really training under pressure. You might be tired, your heart rate might be up, but you're not training under pressure. It's still choreographed because your training partner has an agreement. He's letting you do it.
Even if he's like resisting 40%,
Exactly.
it's still not realistic.
He has to be trying to make you look bad over and over and over again. Those two elements together are, for me, is real training under pressure.
I think that's a big issue with some of the Krav systems that I've seen, or combative systems that I've seen so far. The issue oftentimes is you're used to this idea of, let me introduce you to this idea to take away a knife, you see the craziest stuff, disarm a gun, whatever.
It's most of it, especially with the knife and the gun disarming, I mean, it's total nonsense. It's total nonsense because we could talk about a knife on another episode. I mean, it's going to take us. It's
a whole different thing.
It's just the bottom line is because there's agreements. Okay, I stab you like this, and you do this.
You take it away from me.
Slowly, and I let you do it. You could be doing that for 20 years. You're wasting your time. It's better you do Zumba. At least you lose some weight.
I mean, you need to practice
slowly a couple times to understand
to get the idea. Yeah.
But once you get the idea, which should be a simple idea based on principles, attack and wrap. Like for example, like I always tell people, attack the hand and wrap the hand. Then fight it. Go ahead and fight it. And you know what helps you fight it? The more you wrestle, the more you clinch fight, the more you grapple, the easier it will be for you to control a hand with a knife because you have better understanding of mobility and joints and all that stuff. But if all you do is theoretical, you put your hand up, block slowly, once someone puts a little bit of pressure, especially with the knife, like I said, it's a long topic, a very interesting one, you're going to be into a big surprise.
Yeah, that is very true. I've noticed this with, especially with knife fights, when you simulate them, that from the beginning of my Krav, let's say days, to where I am now, the more that I got used to wrestling, not just grappling, not just punching, but the wrestling part of it, the easier it was to get someone on the ground without even using the specific techniques that you're taught to deal with a knife.
You can't again, you're pulling me into the knife topic, which is
I'm going to pull you away again, but
just look, you can't. There is no technique that works against a knife.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
There's only principles that work against a knife, and because people work scenarios. Come on, it's endless scenarios. I mean, you could be standing on top of you. You could be punching distance, clinch. You could be on the ground. You can't prepare for every single scenario.
Could surprise you with a knife in the fight.
It's always a surprise.
Yeah,
but you could work principles. Full contact sparring, work your wrestling, understand the principles of fighting against a knife, and then you're good to go.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you only wrestle and grapple and do jiu-jitsu, you'll be a salad before you'll be able to fight the knife.
I gave up.
It's the same idea.
Yeah.
But work that's why I try in ICCS to bring those elements together. To bring the concepts of the street into the MMA world. That is I believe that's a perfect combination.
And I think that is something that I've noticed with these drills, that where let's say before I had like a controller, like 4 or 5 buttons that I could use. Now there's a whole keyboard. Like there's different approaches. I can see different things.
Well,
different
I never played
openings.
computer games, but I guess.
But the idea, I think it's just there's more options to use, and I think that is something important where some people might ask, okay, if we're preparing for a knife fight or whatever different situation you might approach in the street.
Fight's a fight.
A fight's a fight, and you need to know these mechanical things, like how do you take someone down? Which role does the hip play in?
Take a takedown, for example. That's a good example. When, in my eyes, when could you actually apply a takedown in a fight? It doesn't matter if it's a street fight or a cage fight. When are you good enough to apply a takedown?
When you're close and when you know what you're doing.
When you don't have to think about the takedown. Right? How many times you have to do over and over and over again? We don't have to tell you don't have to think about it. It doesn't matter the exact number, right? It's a rhetorical.
But it's a lot, yeah.
It's a lot. But that's when when you don't have to think about it. It's like tying on your shoes. You just do it.
And
that's a level of wrestler.
Yeah.
A wrestler has that level.
Yeah.
That's why he's so dangerous in any fight. But a guy who does just self-defense, I kick you in the balls, you still have to think about it. you're in for a big surprise.
Yeah, and this is not talking down on self-defense.
No,
This
of
is
course
talking
not.
down on certain self-defense.
This is just, it's not talking down to anyone. It's just saying it how it is.
Yeah. And that's what I mean. The idea is to have these principles, to know these concepts, to apply them in different areas where you wouldn't even think you needed them. This is something, because I've seen with some people who are new to Krav Maga, sometimes you show them the basics of boxing, like the footwork, how to jab, how to punch, and they're like, why are we training this? This is like combat sports stuff. Why are we doing this? And it's like, it's important as shit to know how to punch properly. It's important to know
Footwork,
how to move. The footwork is
for example,
important.
with multiple opponents, all you have is footwork, basically. To move, and move and hit. If you don't have that footwork that comes from boxing, from stand-up, you'll stop moving, and they'll funnel you, and they'll put you down on the ground, and they'll kick your head in. So here's one reason why footwork is so important.
But people don't know that until they have to apply this under pressure.
Exactly.
And sometimes this is, we used to do these video, we sat down, we watched these videos, we kind of looked at, okay, what went wrong here? Like, how is this a dangerous situation? What can we do to approach these things in our training properly? And sometimes it was just basic stuff like, okay, if that person would have moved instead of stood there, there's a whole different outcome to the whole situation. And these little things you have to think about, you have to teach, you have to show these people, because if they're okay, I know this one trick and I will do it if I'm kind of cornered or something. That's not how stuff works. You can't just like bring out the big guns like, hey, I'm trained to kill you. My arms are registered as weapons, like 3 states. It's not how that works. People who train every day to just beat the head off each other, those people are not like impressed by these techniques.
Also, people say, hey, fighting is for everyone, or self-defense is for everyone. I don't think that's a true statement.
It's for everyone who's motivated to do it.
Yeah, it's not for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you have plenty of victims in this world. Plenty. Victim mentality.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for everyone unless you're trained correctly and you have the right mindset.
So you mean you can change this approach to these conflicts? Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's important to understand. Going into a class twice a week, doing theoretical stuff and all that, to a big extent, that's a waste of time.
Yeah, you said this thing once in one of our instructor courses where you said, if there's a room with, I think you said 100 people or something, and there's someone who walks in with a gun, there's of these 100 people, 90 or 95
98 people will run away.
They will run away, and then there's these 2 who will run, who will approach the. Yeah. And I think that's the idea. Like, though that's most people. I think, especially in areas where it's comfortable.
When shit hits the fan, there's 2 kinds of people. You have victims and you have warriors. There is no middle ground. Understand? And that's what it is. It's like that. Most people are victims.
And the idea is, that's what I'm trying to get to. The idea is that with those people who are not used to that pressure, or who would be part of the 98%, the idea is to give them this approach, this idea, this toolbox to approach it differently.
Exactly.
So it's not just like you're this or you're that, but you can train to become one or the other.
Yeah, to protect your family or your friends around you.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
And I think that's important to see. You're not bound to one of these groups.
Well, you're not bound to one of the groups, but I also believe there are people who are natural warriors, Who
just come into, I've met some of them at ICCS,
There's people who are like, that's what you look for, when you test people out for special forces, you're looking for those kind of people. It's a small few,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So you think in the world of self-defense, of Krav Maga, those are traits that you can give people that are usually not these types of people?
I think a good instructor could probably turn most people into warriors.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, the majority of people, a good instructor.
Mm-hmm.
Sadly, there's a lot of instructors out there who are not very good. Not because they're not good people. It's just like, I think the approach to teaching is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they're turning people with a victim mentality into having even a bigger victim mentality.
Because they think they're not, but they still are in this.
Through the way they teach, you know, it's another subject you could talk about for a long time. But yeah, done correctly, you could turn most people, not everybody, of course, it's never everyone, it's never 100%, but most people, you could turn them into warriors, warrior attitude, mentality, you know, and done correctly as possible.
Also, I think it's important for people who are not familiar with the topic of Krav Maga. I think it's important to talk about the question. Krav Maga is not like judo, like BJJ, where there's techniques. There's like a set framework for all of the different approaches, of the different hooks, of the different throws, whatever they are. But it's like a pretty open thing. It's not just like, okay, you can do this, you can that. This is like, this is Krav Maga. This is not Krav Maga.
Krav Maga is 2 words in Hebrew. It means contact combat.
So it's like an open...
yeah, pretty much.
It's like fighting, basically.
Exactly.
Like a system for fighting.
It's always up to the instructor. His background, what he does, and that's the level of students usually.
Yeah, I think this is important to explain, because we're talking about Krav Maga on one hand, and on the other hand, we're talking about, okay, some people, there's this Krav Maga, there's these concepts out there, they're not really working the way that they may be intended. Like, where's the difference between them, and how can we teach something else? And how is that different from it, and why can that be? I think that's important to explain. It's because Krav Maga is not just this one thing. It's people teach different things.
People like to sometimes use like the pull out the card, or hey, you know, we were here first, or my instructor's uncle of this guy, whatever. But really, I've seen so many Krav Maga instructors in my life who do things differently. Some are really good, some are not so good. You know, a lot of them I have a lot of respect for. In the military, same thing. You know, depending on the guy's background, he'll teach. Is it a good thing? I don't think it's a good thing. I think there should be like a structured way of doing it that works. But that's how it is, because contact combat. Okay, you know, I think you could do this and this, and then people like to use that name. And one of the reasons why Krav Maga has a bad rep in the full contact world is because of that. There's a lot of nonsense. Because you don't have to really be good to be a Krav Maga instructor.
Because it can't really be tested in these.
Yeah, I'm saying, you know, I'm a badass, you know, I'm this and that, and, you know, learn. And the poor guys, people who don't know any better, they watch a video on YouTube, look at this guy, he's disarming a gun or a knife. Wow, it's really good. It looks like a Hollywood movie, but that's exactly what it is.
He has camo pants on.
Yeah, he's probably from the special forces. He's probably so tactical, you know.
He has tattoos everywhere.
Yeah, they go learn from him, and they don't know any better. And then
because how would you? You're going there to learn. Yeah, that's the idea.
People who do have real contact experience, they look at it like that doesn't work, and then Krav has a bad rep, sadly because of that, you know. But honestly, you know, Krav is contact combat. So of course it works, depending on who taught you it and how he taught you it with the right principles. Of course it may work. And like I said, if it doesn't work in the ring, it's not going to work in the street. You know, and a lot of what they do doesn't work not in the ring and not in the street. You know, because it's Hollywood took over martial arts and people do a lot of theoretical crap. But bottom line, it comes down to your instructor. You know, it comes down to his experience, his knowledge, if he does it correctly.
Yeah. So in summary, Krav Maga is kind of like an umbrella term. Like there's different concepts. They're all being sold under the name. This is Krav Maga.
Yeah.
And also, I think something that happens a lot of the time is there's someone who has some sort of law enforcement or military pedigree, and these people use this idea to say, I'm a proficient fighter. Would you say this is automatically the case? Someone was in the military, now they're a good fighter?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. First of all, it doesn't mean you're a good instructor.
That's also a big point,
and you have to be a good instructor.
Being a good fighter doesn't mean you're a good instructor,
An instructor is a profession.
Yeah.
You have to know how to teach someone. Like there's a lot of great pro MMA fighters out there. Doesn't make them good coaches. Yeah. It's the same thing. And then also, like, the fact that someone was in the military, it doesn't make him an expert on all the contact combat fields at all. Far from it, in fact, far from it. So yeah, absolutely has nothing to do with, the two have nothing to do with each other,
Because also in law enforcement or in military, you're also, there's a specific field. Because in law enforcement, for instance, you have this idea of restricting and detaining someone.
Yeah, they need, like, I seen like videos, for example, of a Krav Maga seminar where the instructor, it's in Europe. He comes there in a military uniform. I mean, he's teaching civilians. Come on, And then, he shows them how he kicks a door in with a weapon and how he clears a corner. These guys never held a weapon in their life. They probably never will. They live in Europe. And look, if that's what they want to see and that's what they pay for, I mean, so yeah, it's great. But what did you learn for your life? For your life. Yeah. What did you learn? That guy's a badass? And what? So that's not my approach to teaching. But a lot of times people just want to live in a fantasy, And then again, that's why it gives a bad rep when it comes to people who actually know how to fight, But it's sad because it shouldn't have a bad rep when people really look into it and see what it's all about. Krav Maga saves lives. How do I know it saves lives? Because I work with people who have to use it, in the military or in a private life. So done correctly with a good instructor, it saves lives. And it's not a martial art; it's a fighting system. It's a fighting system which should be based on principles, very adaptable. Change the technique if it doesn't work, and move on to the next. Not arguing about, no, my technique was here first, or it must be the best. But that's what it is. It's just a fighting system that you have to adapt to the ever-changing battlefield. Just like the weapon, changed since 1914, and today it's not the same rifle. Why? Because people learn from experience. Fighting changes. Even look at the sport of MMA, the level you have today and the level you had in the 90s. You can't compare the two. It's always fun to watch the old fights, how, used to the brawls, respect. All of them are great fighters. But today, the level is much higher. And in any
there's different approaches. We have to have different answers to those approaches.
I assume almost in any industry, it's like that, Same thing in Krav. The battlefield changes, you have to change your training. And you see what works, what doesn't work, you throw out what doesn't work, But I understand why people, disrespect Krav, but also I don't like to hear it, because if you really would know, you would not disrespect it. So I also it's sad that people give it a bad rep, a lot of bad instructors. But really, doing it correctly, it saves lives. It saves lives. I've seen it over and over and over again. Doing it correctly, though.
And Sharir, one last question for today. Talking about people, or if people watch these Krav systems, they see something where they feel like this doesn't make sense. They do some sort of combative sports, let's say boxing, maybe MMA, and they think, okay, this what I'm doing here is more proper to, or is more suited to this occasion that I'm learning, or I'm practicing something that would be more of use in the situation that I'm looking at. Do you think that this mindset of the combat sport that I am practicing is sufficient for self-defense? Do you think this is an approach that lacks perspective, or do you think that, for instance, doing MMA is enough to be?
No, absolutely not. It's a lot, and it's maybe the most important element because it turns you into a fighter. But there is the principles of street fighting. You could be a great MMA fighter. What if 3 people jump you? Then what? What do you do then? What's your plan? Right? What if a guy pulls a knife, starts stabbing you? He stabs you in your back. You turn around, he stabs you in your chest. Now you understand what's going on. Now you fight. What's your plan? What's your plan now? So you should mix the two. That's what we do. But just being just an MMA fighter, thinking you're all that, you might be a tough guy, but you're not going to be tough against 3 or 4 people with sticks. What about the whole idea of situational awareness? Where's that? Or knowing how to avoid a fight, knowing how to de-escalate. Where's that? Right? You think in many cases it's exactly the opposite. Oh, I'm an MMA fighter. I'm the baddest, meanest person on the planet. So I'm not going to de-escalate anything. Back off. He backs off. He brings 10 people back to you. Now what you going to do, tough guy? Right? But if you knew how to de-escalate, you're going to probably avoid the fight from ever even happening. Mm-hmm. So yeah, absolutely, it's not enough. It has to have the combination of both. The MMA is great. Wrestling, that's what we do. Street wrestling, street boxing, street grappling. Right? If you would ask me, what does a person need to be able to survive a fight? What tools would I give him? Striking, clinch, wrestling, grappling. Of course, dealing with weapons and multiple opponents, fight principles, de-escalating a fight, situational awareness, all those together create the perfect fighter. You know, but you have to remember those things as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a wrap. Sharir, we'll be back next week with a new episode. Sharir, thank you for coming.
Well, thank you. I'm looking forward for this
next episode.
Journey with you.
See you guys next week.
Bye-bye.